Travis, do you hear the rain?
Yes, I do.
Great. Well, it's no secret amongst Nintendo Switch fans that it has been quite a little while now since our last Nintendo Direct, and that's leaving people with a lot of questions of what actually is happening right now as far as games coming out for the Switch. Because we had a pretty good 2019, but with 2020, the schedule's looking a little barren right now. Well, thankfully, we actually have some kind of actual evidence for once that there is a Direct possibly coming soon, maybe possibly even two before the end of March, one focusing on indie titles and another that is a more traditional all-out Nintendo Direct. Now, a lot of people love to do their theory videos about what's going to be there. I'm not going to go so far as to say that anything I talk about right now is even possible or likely, but let's just talk about a lot of games that I think would be awesome to have come to the Switch, either as ports or some big Nintendo franchises that it's just about time we got a sequel to. First off, let's just talk a couple ports from the one system that has been a goldmine for the Switch, its own dead predecessor, the Wii U. Now, most of the big games at this point have either been officially announced or ported to the Switch, but there's a couple left over. I know everyone's got their list of ones they really want to see happen, but there's one, kind of two, three, four, five. There's a group of them that I want to talk about real quick that I think would be really good on the Switch. And the first one is Super Mario 3D World. Of all the Wii U games that have gotten ported to the Switch, it is so bizarre to me that Super Mario 3D World is not amongst them, especially considering the fact that New Super Mario Bros. U has a Switch port. Now, if you're not familiar with this game because you didn't play it on the Wii U, it's just fair because a lot of people didn't play the Wii U in general. Super Mario 3D World was one of the first big games to come onto the Wii U and was one of the best ones to top it off. It kind of walks a balance line between the 2D style Mario games that Nintendo started pumping out later that focused on multiplayer, while still maintaining 3D aspects of some of the more 3D style Mario games, but with a more traditional level structure, not necessarily the full-blown exploration of Super Mario 64 or Odyssey. Because of this, it kind of occupies an interesting midpoint style that not a lot of Mario games really make use of, and more importantly, it was a fantastic multiplayer game, which, given the fact that the Switch is used by a lot of people as a handheld, seems like something that would be a really good fit. And there really isn't any unique mechanic about it that requires the dual screen setup that the Wii U had. This is one of the last Wii U games that a lot of people have been demanding to make its way to the Switch, and there has been some very light rumor that it could be something announced later this year, but there's been nothing concrete, nothing official from Nintendo, and hopefully that changes really soon. Now, the other thing I want to talk about from the Wii U is not a singular game, but instead, I really love the idea of getting some kind of Legend of Zelda HD collection. We got remakes of both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on the Wii U that looked and played great, and it's a shame that those versions are currently locked on the Wii U system. And while Nintendo could potentially release these individually like they have with a lot of ports, it would be really cool if they maybe just took a break from that approach and instead just gave us a collection featuring both these games and maybe even throw in some of the 3DS remakes like Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time while they're at it. I know a lot of people are hoping that Breath of the Wild 2 comes out later this year, and I've made it no secret that I'm a little more skeptical of that. I honestly really think it's going to be a 2021 release, but if that's the case, I don't think Nintendo's going to leave us hanging with no Zelda releases this year, so I think it's very likely that we'll either get some kind of minor Zelda game announced for 2020, or possibly something like this HD collection would be really cool to see happen. I know there's a lot more Wii U games that people are really hoping to see come to the Switch, but of what's left, I think these are the ones that probably have the best shot. That doesn't rule out other possibilities. There could definitely be a chance of something like Xenoblade Chronicles X or some of the other leftover games, but those are the ones that I think really have the best shot. While ports are cool, I think the thing a lot more people would be really excited for, though, is of course new entries and franchises that have just been left unloved a little too long. Now, everyone's got their list of personal favorites they'd love to see come back. Obviously, yours is going to vary a little bit from mine, but here are some titles in particular that I really think it's about time come back on the Switch. Either just because there hasn't been a new one in a long time and that bothers me, or it's something that honestly I think would just be really at home with the Switch's ability to switch between dock and handheld gameplay, and more importantly, making use of Joy-Cons. First off, because it's me and I love RPGs and I always talk about this game every single time I talk about something Nintendo needs to bring back, Golden Sun. We have not had a Golden Sun in a very long time. In fact, by the end of this year, if we do not have a new one, it will now have been a full 10 years since Dark Dawn came out. And before that one, there was also a long gap from Golden Sun Lost Age, which was the second one in the series, that came out back in 2002. So there was an 8-year gap, and right now, we've got a 9-10 year possibly still running gap going on. The original 2 Golden Sun games were amongst my favorite GBA games, and while the sequel Dark Dawn on DS wasn't quite as good, it was still a really solid game that, more importantly, left us with a cliffhanger that there still hasn't been any follow-up to. While it has been a while, like I mentioned earlier, the series already had some pretty crazy gaps between games, and the developer behind them, Camelot, is currently not slated with any game releases. They've released a bunch of games for Nintendo, the last of which was Mario Tennis Aces, and they have been completely quiet since then, which hopefully means they have been working on something else for Nintendo, and if anything, I really, really hope it's Golden Sun. Do I think it's likely? Honestly, not really. I've kind of mostly accepted the fact that the series is probably dead, but I still want to hold out on hope and see that maybe, just maybe, the Switch could be the time for it to come back. Next up, let's talk Pokemon. Now, obviously, there are a lot of Pokemon games out there. We just had some new mainline releases, we've got DLC announced to them, we just got a remake of Mystery Dungeon coming out. There's no shortage of new Pokemon games, but what there is a shortage of is a sequel to, I think, one of the most fun Pokemon games that we got way back in 1999, Pokémon Snap. To be honest, the main reason why I'm really hyped up for the idea of a new Pokémon Snap is because of the fact that it made so much sense for that to happen on the Wii U, and it didn't. The entire concept of having the tablet screen with a TV and you could interact the two and use one like a camera, it just made sense, and obviously that didn't happen. Well, I think the Switch wouldn't be quite as appropriate of a home. It would still obviously work out really well, especially considering the fact that you have use of motion controls, so while holding Joy-Cons on the tablet, you could treat it like a little portable camera still, and that just makes sense. I do admit that Pokemon Snap is one of those games where I think the nostalgia does heavily override how much fun I actually have with that style of game nowadays, but I think if you took that core concept and expanded it and made a much larger game, especially with how much has happened in the Pokemon franchise since that came out, I think there's a lot of potential there for something new. Again, kind of like Golden Sun, I'm pretty doubtful that something like this would actually happen, but if there's any kind of Hail Mary move that I think would be really cool to see make a comeback, that's one of the big ones. Speaking of other huge Nintendo franchises that have tons of spin-offs, but I still want more, Mario. Obviously, there are a lot of different Mario games out there that cover all kinds of different insane genres. One particular kind of sub one they've done a lot of is sports games, not just in the sense of racing titles like Mario Kart, but also just straight up sports, like with things like Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, but one in particular that we haven't had in a long time is Mario Strikers. If you're not familiar with this franchise, I don't blame you. They've only made 2 of them, one way back on the GameCube in 2005 and a sequel on the Wii in 2007, and that has been it, nothing ever since. To be honest, I've never really been a huge fan of a lot of the Mario sports games. Tennis, golf, I've had fun, I've played with friends, but it's never been something that's really grabbed me. The exception to that is Strikers. I played so much of Strikers Charged on the Wii. It's kind of like soccer, but in the usual Mario fashion, it's pumped up in a lot of insane ways. All the characters have their own special attacks. It was this really frantic game that was so much fun, and it shocks me that to this day, there still hasn't been a new one. Kind of like with Golden Sun, if you take a look at the developer right now, there is currently a gap as far as what their next project is. Their next level games, and the last game they released was Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch. So that's a pretty recent release, but since then, there hasn't been any official word on what they're working on next. So, you know, just kind of following that same logic, if we were going to get any kind of new Nintendo title from them, that'd be really cool. So far, the games we've been talking about are titles that haven't had a new entry in a long time. The next one doesn't actually have that situation. It has a new release for the Wii U. It's just that none of them have been particularly good, and that's Star Fox. Star Fox 64 is one of the games that I've soaked the most time in on my N64, and it is nuts to me that for how much I loved that game, not a single release since then has hit me the same way. Command Mission on the DS was fine. That one was okay. If you haven't played that one, I actually think it is worth checking out if you just want some kind of Star Fox fix. But everything after that has been kind of a mess. Star Fox Adventure was a rebranded other game that they just made a Star Fox game, and it wasn't very good to begin with. Star Fox Assault just felt kind of hollow, and Star Fox Zero on the Wii U was just very much a mess of a game to play, while basically being a rerun of a lot of stuff we've already done before. What's insane to me about this is the fact that the formula behind Star Fox 64 was so simple and straightforward, and while I'm not necessarily opposed to innovation and trying new things, a lot of stuff they've done with later Star Fox games just seems like it was in the wrong direction. They were either undoing things that made that classic game great, or they were trying new stuff that in the end wasn't really tested enough and became a mess, like the control scheme for Star Fox Zero. Despite the fact that new entries have just not been good time and time again, I can't help but hold out hope that there's going to be another attempt, and this time, this is going to be the one, that we'll actually get one that really lives up to Star Fox 64, or if it does change things up heavily, it does it for the better. One other game that has been getting steady releases but doesn't have a presence on the Switch yet that I think would make perfect sense is WarioWare. If you haven't played a WarioWare game before, they kind of vary with each release, but the main focus is on having numerous, frantic, insane minigames back-to-back that are just really bizarre to watch someone else play, but when you're in the middle of it, is so much fun. The thing about WarioWare, though, is that because of its focus on insane, fast-paced minigames, the system you play it on is very important, because that influences what kind of minigames you can do. Oftentimes what you play is based on that. Like if it's a 3DS title, obviously you're going to be doing stuff with the stylus. I think the best example of the most fun I've had on a WarioWare game was back in 2006, when we got WarioWare Smooth Moves on the Wii. That had some of the most insane ones because it actually involved full body movements where you're grabbing the Wiimote, shaking it around, putting on your nose like an elephant, doing all kinds of insane stuff. And none of the releases since then have been able to really properly capitalize on that style of gameplay because of the systems they're on. And the Switch is the perfect time to bring that back because the Joy-Cons are really just a fancier, more advanced version of what the Wiimote was capable of. Honestly, at this point, I'd even just take a port of Smooth Moves on the Switch at this point because I think it would work so well. But if they could just take it a step further and really take advantage of what the Switch is capable of, even doing maybe some bizarre ideas where you have to switch between docked and handheld mode, that's the kind of game that would really make use of all the unique features the Switch has, and I'm still waiting on it. Obviously, if you look over the course of Nintendo's history, there are a lot more games worthy of sequels or ports or just whatever. These are just some of the ones that I'm most excited for. I know everyone's got their list out there of more they want, whether that's a new F-Zero racing game or even officially finally getting Mother 3 in the West. So let me know down below in the comments what you guys think. What games do you want to see Nintendo finally bring out for the Switch, whether it's one of your favorite old games that finally needs a new port job, or if you want to see a franchise come back to life. If you're not familiar with this franchise, I don't blame you, because we haven't had a new one since 2007 on the Wii with Super Mario I keep wanting to say Brothers as a habit. Damn you, Mario, and your various titles that make use of the same 4 words in different interchangeable combinations. That cut's gonna probably make it in.